Welcome to this live cast on our future economies. Capitalism, despite the tremendous increase in worldwide welfare through its innovative power and freedom, has at the same time a number of negative consequences. A transition is necessary to overcome ecological destruction, decrease in quality of life, and growing inequality. Given geopolitical developments, Europe has an important role to play in this transition. In the livecast, we will start an open dialogue and discuss this transition with internationally renowned economists from all over the world. Questions will pass by, such as each week, we will discuss these matters with 2 economists, resulting in 10 online dialogues in 10 weeks, where we will share viewpoints and collect ideas on how capitalism's innovative and creative powers can go hand in hand with fostering an equal and just society. A different subject every week. Together we can build a basis for economies that are beneficial to all of us. You can participate by putting your questions and remarks in the chat. So, let's talk.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for being here with us tonight, Professor Sachs.
Pleasure.
Tonight we're discussing about how to align economies to end poverty. And I want to start off with your book that you published in 2015 and move on later on to the latest book you've just published. In your book, The Age of Sustainable Development, you analyze the challenges of achieving economic growth while protecting the environment and achieving an equitable distribution of resources. This is also the theme of tonight, no surprises there. Before we start with the book, I'd like to ask you the question, what is the biggest myth concerning sustainable development that you keep hearing?
Well, I think there are many misunderstandings, but the most important thing to know is that it is achievable. We have to get beyond platitudes. We don't have a free market economy. We shouldn't have a free market economy. We have a mixed economy with complex institutions, and our job is a complex one to understand better how to change institutions in light of changing needs. I'd actually like to go back to Jesus for one moment, if we might. He did not mean what could be casually interpreted in Matthew 26. He was specifically saying, when this woman is anointing me, she's preparing me for my burial. He was not making a sociological statement, nor was he making a forecast 2,000 years later. And I think it's not helpful, actually, to take these things out of context. But Jesus is with us in a different sense as a great moral teacher. Among great moral teachers in our history, he reminded us to be kind to the poor and said that feeding the least among thee feeds me. And that, I think, is a present sentiment, which is that our societies need an ethical orientation to ensure that there is availability of human dignity and basic needs for everybody on the planet. And unlike Jesus's time, which was a time of mass poverty around the world in agrarian societies, there is plenty right now to ensure that every person on this planet can meet all of the basic needs that are given as human rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that means universal access to education, universal access to healthcare, universal access to social protection, and so on. And what is important is to understand what kind of institutions, partly markets, and within markets, partly kinds of companies, but also government playing a central role, because in the Netherlands, you get your health care because the government mandates that there should be health coverage for all. This is a basic decency in a well-to-do society, and it's possible to have that for everybody in the world. So we need to understand that economics is more complex than markets. It's more complex than a debate about any particular even kind of business, though I greatly appreciate social business as a major component of a decent society, because a functioning economy in the real world needs to have government, it needs to have a social business sector, it can have a very healthy private business sector, as long as politics are not corrupted by money in politics as they are in my country, for example. And so I just urge us to have a more sophisticated discussion globally to understand that the goals we've set, the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, are technically within reach. We're a very rich world, but we need taxation, redistribution, public services, public investment, proper company law that is up to date with our needs. Instead, we have a kind of mythology of the free market as if we're still living in 1776 with Adam Smith's wonderful book, by the way, but after all, it's 250 years old. So it's a historical text. It's not a current text. Nor should we live with the simple-minded ideas that you would get maybe out of a bad economics textbook about the invisible hand and free market and so forth. These are myths that help us to understand certain things but can blind us to other things. The world is more complex, and the institutional framework that we need to ensure well-being and human dignity is fundamentally a mixed system with private ownership, public services, public ownership, and many different streams running into into social outcomes, but grounded in an ethics that calls on us to ensure that everybody has dignity and everybody can meet basic economic needs. And I can tell you, we can go into it at any length, but there's plenty available to ensure that in an environmentally sustainable way.
So the Sustainable Development Goals are one of the means in which we are trying to achieve that. The Sustainable Development Goals can be seen as sort of an expansion on the Millennium Development Goals in order to address extreme poverty, environmental degradation, political, economical injustice, and so forth. Let me get your assessment, Professor Sachs. The Sustainable Development Goals were formulated in 2012. Has enough progress been made since then, to your mind?
Well, in 2012, governments took the decision to have Sustainable Development Goals, and they were negotiated over 3 years and then adopted in September of 2015. Then my country did something really, really stupid, which was to bring to power a psychopathic president, Donald Trump. And I hope that we're getting rid of him next week in our elections, because this was a huge setback for my own country and for the world. The United States is an important country, and it has a terrible leader. And that has created a huge mess over the last 4 years, because what has Trump done? He's tried to break the global cooperation that is needed. He never says Sustainable Development Goals. He has walked out of the World Health Organization, out of the Human Rights Council, out of UNESCO, out of the Paris Climate Agreement. And so this is a big problem, because we have a powerful country that still some in Europe know is important as the lead country of NATO, for example, but with disastrous leadership right now. So to achieve anything, we need politics, and we need enough public understanding. And I really hope that the United States public delivers next week. It's no sure thing, by the way, that we'll count the votes right or how they'll come out. But if we have Trump continuing, we will not achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. I fear that we will actually descend into global conflict. If we get rid of Trump, then we have the opportunity both to stop the pandemic, because this terrible president has done nothing to stop the pandemic in the United States, and then we can get on to sensible rebuilding and global cooperation.
Yeah.
But let me just give one pertinent example in this. During the pandemic, the online economy has soared. Of course, so we live online, basically, many of us. And those who own the portals of the online economy, like Jeffrey Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, have had an increase of wealth that is virtually unimaginable for us. There are now 500 people in the world that have a net worth combined of $6.8 trillion. And the top 10 people in the world have a net worth of basically $1 trillion. Now, the United States political system is so corrupt that these people are not paying taxes properly. They are not contributing to the public good adequately. And this is something that needs to be addressed. If you have 500 people with $6.8 trillion of net worth, it tells you two things. One is just a few people in the world could finance the solutions for billions of people. Literally, a few hundred people could finance solutions for billions of people. And second, they're not called to do so. They're not reading Matthew 25, where Jesus says it's your responsibility, or that for a rich person to enter heaven is like a camel passing through the head of a needle. As not to quote scriptures too much, but the point is that we do not have a balanced society right now. We have an imbalance of wealth that is so huge that solutions that are at hand are not being taken. And when you get so deranged as this, you end up with a deranged leader and even a rich country that can't stop an epidemic, which is what we have right now. We have a rip-roaring epidemic because we have a nut as president, basically. So this is the real situation that we're facing.
So in your book, The Ages of Globalization, your latest book, you draw upon, among many other things, you draw upon a history of globalization in order to understand why we are here, where we are now today. And I'm just wondering if you could quickly comment on that, Professor Sachs. How can a history of globalization help us to that extent, help us to better understand the challenges that we face today, some of the challenges you just mentioned?
We should understand what globalization has afforded in real progress, what it has cost us, and what we can learn from history. So globalization has included a sequence of technological advances that have had a profound beneficial effect on human society, from the mobilization of mass energy at the beginning of the industrial era to electrification and now to the digital age. And poverty has diminished remarkably around the world because of this. That's the positive side. The negative side is that globalization has come along with violence, with war, with suppression, with deaths of untold millions through abuse of the powerful and the rich. And that has been part of the history as well. The third part of the history is a growing consciousness over time of our common stake in the world. Because the idea of a common humanity around a common framework, while it was part of the prophetic vision of Isaiah and Jesus and so forth in the biblical terms and of other sages, in practical terms, this is an idea that's only around 200 years old. And in modern terms, the UN is in its 75th year this year, as it was established in 1945. We're still in the early stage of trying to make a global civilization that is truly civilized. And this is our greatest challenge right now. We have powerful technologies that could end poverty if we use them properly in this mixed economic setting with a global moral agenda.
Yes.
But if we don't do it, we can end up destroying ourselves, as has been the case of other transitions in history.
Oh. Well, I think we've had a great setting of the scene so far, and quite the sense of urgency from both our speakers. Let's move on to the next part of the debate, the discussion.